Hello and welcome to part 4 of my C# beginners tutorials here on Table Flip Games. I am Tommy, and in this video I'm going to be looking at the use of variables and the ability to write expressions in a simple C# program. If you recall my previous video on the Hello World program, we wrote a simple executable that prints the phrase Hello World to the screen. When we did that, we originally did it in Notepad++ and covered the importance of using the compiler and then actually calling the executable. And then after that, in part 3, we subsequently integrated this workflow into Visual Studio so that we can compile and execute the code from within the IDE. Now that's cool and all, but what we've done so far doesn't allow us to do any sort of interesting computation with it. As such, we often want to be able to store data, be it numbers or text, and use it at a later point as part of some calculation we're doing. This leads us ultimately to the use of variables and expressions. Variables are means by which to store a value that we're going to use in our program. That value can be a variety of different types of information, and we'll take a look at what these are later in the video. Once we have some variables lying around, we can start to write expressions, where we can use the values inside these variables in order to create some sort of outcome. We might be trying to do a bit of math, we might be trying to glue together a sentence. Either way, we're using the expression in order to do something interesting. Variables are great in that they allow us to store a particular piece of information that we want at a given time and can then reuse it when it suits us. We can also update and change whatever value that variable is storing, which is kind of implied in the name itself. Variable, meaning it's liable to change. As such, we can store a value and then update it over time as we continue to do more calculations with it. Now, a variable is represented by two things in a program. Its type and its name. The type is used by the language to define what type of information we're storing, and it also enforces certain rules on how we can treat it. This is useful if you have a number for doing a calculation. You would store it using a numeric type, and I'll cover them in a minute. But you could also store information as a single character or a line of text. Now, once the type is established, we need to know what to call it within the program by giving it a name. These names help us to understand the code we're writing. So let's cover some of the basic variables in C#, also known as primitive types, and we're going to use these in this and upcoming videos. There's int, which is an integer or whole number that can be positive or negative within the ranges shown on screen now. Double and float, floating point numbers that can also be positive or negative. These have different ranges and precision values, with double being more precise. Char, which stores a single alphanumeric character, like say a letter of the alphabet. String, which stores a collection of characters as a piece of text. Bool, which represents the Boolean values of true and false, and so come in handy in future videos on conditionals and loops. And there are also a bunch of other primitives that I'm not covering here, such as byte, short, and long, and I don't plan on using them in these videos, but if you're interested in seeing what they are, I've left a link in the description to the documentation page on primitive C# types. So let's write some simple expressions that declare a bunch of variables and store values within them. So here we are, we're back in the Visual Studio project from the last time round. I've cleaned this up a little bit, I've added some information here, and this is all part of a larger C# project, which for our patrons, I'll actually be making available. So if you're a patron of the channel, you'll be able to access these resources and then use them yourself if you want, or just play around with my code, do whatever you like. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually start by creating another C# file or class in another folder to get me started. And I've now got it, it's in this new beginners Hello World folder. That's where I've put this Hello World file, as we can see here. And what I actually did as well is I'm using namespaces. So this is a minor thing. What I'm actually doing is these namespaces kind of reflect the name of the project and then the folders I'm creating. So this is a better way for me to consolidate and manage my code a little bit. It's not going to be a big issue right now. You're probably going to see me using it a lot more in later videos. So if you're seeing this and you're going, well, my code doesn't look like that, don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. Now, one of the things I'm going to have to do in a minute is actually I'm going to have to comment out these lines of code. And you'll see why in a second. So I'm going to go into expressions. I'm going to right click, add class. And I'm going to just create a class called simple expressions. And add. Here it is. It's over here. And I'm going to create my main method like I did before. Public static void main string args. Now, this is actually not a big deal until you try and compile it, and then I actually get an error that says program has more than one entry point defined. Compile with /main to specify the type that contains the entry point. What it's saying is I can't have two files in the same console project that both have a main method in them. So I'm actually going to just comment this out, and what I need to do is I need to write comments. So to do that, I'm going to hit / twice on the keyboard, and that creates, notice how it's a different color, and I'm going to write a little message here. I've commented out this code so that it doesn't cause a compiler error. Now I can actually do this in one of two ways, or actually one of three ways. I can go and hit / on every line, and what this actually does, ignore the compiler for a minute, is I've just removed that code. That is now the way that it's formatted in green. It means that the compiler doesn't read it. So if I hit Control-Shift-B now, the compiler error goes away. Alternatively, I could actually have done this another way. Delete it. I could highlight all these and then use this menu command up here. Comment out the selected lines. Or you can actually, I'm going to undo that, Control-Z. I kind of mistakenly thought if I tap it twice, it's going to undo it, but it doesn't. It just comments it twice. The other way to do that same thing is hit Control-K and then Control-C right after each other. But we don't want that, so Control-Z, back it out. Another way to do it is I actually want to just say, okay, instead of having to do this on every single line, put that // in, is I'm going to say / and then star. And that actually, what that's doing is it's commenting out every single line beneath it until I put another closing comment. So which is star and then /. And what that does is it just says, okay, everything between these 2 points I've commented out. Okay? Now it's really important to make sure if you're doing, you can write notes to yourself in your comments. That's often why I do it. So you can see here I've actually left a message to myself. But if I was to delete those backspaces, the compiler has a fit because I've just written in English and it's like, dude, I don't know what you're doing. I don't understand this. So let's put that back. Okay, let's go back over then to my other file. I can either just click onto it. I'm also just going to close that because I don't need it. So here we go. I have my new simple expressions class and I'm going to write some new code. For this example, I'm going to do some math and then store a string of text I want to push to the screen. Once it's all done, I can then print it out using the console writeline command I've already used in previous videos. So let's get started. I'm going to start by creating a variable which is of type integer and call it number. And I'm going to do it like so. Int, you can see here the autocomplete goes, oh yeah, int, I recognize that, that makes sense. And then number with a semicolon. Now note how int is highlighted in blue because the language actually recognizes that I'm trying to declare a variable which is a system int32 or a 32-bit signed integer, and I've called it number. Now what's interesting is I've actually got a small squiggle command or kind of yellow squiggle line down here. This is what we call a warning. And I'm going to just kind of show it down here by clicking on the exclamation mark because right now if you can actually enable and disable certain messages from appearing by clicking on them. And what it's actually saying is the variable number is declared but never used. So what I actually need to do is give it a value and actually do something with it, and then that warning will go away. Now, a warning doesn't break the compilation. When you compile it, it's going to be fine. Watch. Compiled, 0 errors, no problem, build succeeded. However, it's just kind of saying to me, hey man, like maybe you're not paying attention, but like this is maybe a little problematic. Maybe you've left this variable here and forgot to use it. It's kind of handy. But generally I try and keep my warnings down, but at the same time, it's not the end of the world if I have a couple of them cropping up. Now, what I've done with number is I've actually what we call declared it. So I've declared I have a variable called number, but it doesn't actually have any value, so I can't really do anything with it. So what I'm going to do is just say number equals 5, semicolon, and now I've actually assigned it. Now, interestingly, the warning hasn't gone away. And one of the reasons for that is we still haven't done anything with it. All I've done is just give it a value, and it's like, yeah, man, you're now storing information, but you're not using it in any interesting way. So don't worry, that warning will disappear. Now, you'll note that I actually did the declaration and then the assignment of the variable over 2 lines. I'm actually going to leave a comment. declared a variable called number, and note I had to use my 2 forward slashes so I could write the comment, and then assigned the value 5 to the variable. Oh, spelling. However, I can actually do all this in one line if I really want. So I'll do that for the next one. I'm going to create another number, which, interestingly, because how variable names work, I can't have 2 variables with the same name, but, you know, I could just add a number to it. So I'm going to call it number 2, and I'm going to say that has the value of 6, semicolon. And I'm going to leave a little comment for you. Declared and assigned, all in one line. Both of these are perfectly valid, not an issue which way you like to do it. I actually found that it really comes down to each individual project you're working on. Don't worry about it, you can do it either way. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a short expression that adds the 2 of them together. So I'm going to create a new variable int number 3, and I'm going to say that number 3 is equal to number plus number 2. Notice how the warnings have now gone away? And the reason for that is that when I created number 3, it's actually saying, right, well, what you've done is you're actually using the variable number and the number 2 to create variable number 3. So the warning that we weren't using number and number 2 is now gone because, hey, you've now actually used these variables. Oh, I'm going to write a little comment for you. Summed the 2 variables together. Now, one thing as I'm doing this, don't feel compelled to write a comment on every single line of code that you have. I don't do that. What you'll tend to find, you know, when you're getting into this later on, is you'll actually write comments over big chunks of code, just to kind of refresh yourself on what it was doing and to remind you of what it did. Here, I'm doing this just to help you out, but don't feel compelled to do this for every single line. But certainly at the moment, it might be useful for you just to remember what each of these lines of code are doing. With this done, I'm now going to build up a chunk of text to first welcome the user, then a second that displays what I was trying to calculate, and then we're going to print all that out to the screen. So first up, I'm going to create a variable of type string, because that's what we use for text. I'm going to call this welcome, and I'm going to give it the value welcome to my expression program. Semicolon at the end, of course. And again, I'm going to get a warning because I'm not using it. Don't worry about it. String output, just my second line, is the sum. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use the values of these variables in the string. And I'm going to, what we call concatenate the string. The sum of, I'm going to leave a space, and then the plus sign, number, and space, and then the plus sign number 2. Oh, then I need a plus is, so what that line of code actually says is create a variable called output, which is of type string, and what we're doing is we're gluing together 3 bits of text and 3 numbers, but we're pulling the numbers out of variables. So it's essentially gluing together a small bit of text that says the sum of, and then the value from this variable, then this bit of text here, then another variable, and that bit of text, and then that variable. And that's going to come out really nicely when I actually write it to the screen. So let's do that. I'm going to do console.writeLine, and I'm first just going to use welcome. Now note here that I'm actually using a string and passing that string through console.writeLine. Whereas if I actually go back to hello world, I was literally writing the text in here. Both of these are totally valid because effectively it treats it as the same thing, because that is of type string, and writing the text there, that is technically a string. So both of these are considered the same thing, so it's not a big issue. And lastly, console.writeLine, and I'm going to write output. I'm going to compile it with Control-Shift-B. And then I'm going to run it by going to debug, start without debugging. Oh, Windows over here again. Drag it over. Welcome to my expression program. The sum of 5 and 6 is 11. And it's done that purely by taking that code, gluing together the value of the variables with the text, and it creates it in a nice little string we can stick out on the screen. Fantastic. Awesome. So we're now using Visual Studio to build this, and it is just your first program, and it's a really simple mathematical calculation. You know, it's not hugely exciting, but it's cool and it works. And there's other operations that you can play around with that we'll see in other videos where we could maybe subtract things, we could multiply things. I'll come back to that in another video just to show you how to do that. But for now, I just wanted to get the basics down. I'm Tommy, this has been part 4 of the C# beginners tutorials on table flip games. So in the next video, I'm going to look at how to read data in from the command line so you can then store it and use it yourself in your own programs. This tutorial, alongside all the other game development videos here on Tableflip, is supported via our Patreon. To get access to all of our tutorial materials and other content, head on over to patreon.com/tableflipgames. Thanks for watching, I'll see you in the next video.